Behind the discourse of love and unity, there exists a system carefully designed to prevent any form of doubt. Jehovah's Witnesses don't just preach what they believe. They shape the minds of their followers so that they don't even think about questioning. Today, you're going to discover the 5 psychological tactics that make this happen, and perhaps you'll realize that freedom of thought has never been so rare. But before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt afraid to ask a question? Not because you didn't know the answer, but because you knew the question itself would make you look bad? That's exactly the environment we're going to explore today. For millions of people around the world, Jehovah's Witnesses represent truth, safety, and the promise of paradise. But beneath this surface lies something far more complex, a sophisticated psychological framework that doesn't just teach beliefs, but actively prevents those beliefs from being examined. And the most disturbing part? Most people inside this system don't even realize it's happening. You see, control doesn't always look like chains and prison cells. Sometimes it looks like love. Sometimes it sounds like protection. And sometimes it disguises itself as spiritual guidance. The most effective forms of control are the ones you can't see, the ones that make you police your own thoughts before anyone else has to. Throughout this video, we're going to examine 5 specific tactics used within the Jehovah's Witness organization, not to attack individual believers, but to understand the mechanisms that keep sincere people from asking honest questions. These aren't just random behaviors. They're part of a consistent pattern that appears in high-control religious groups around the world. And understanding them might help you recognize similar patterns in other areas of life. So whether you're a current Jehovah's Witness struggling with doubts, someone who's left and trying to understand what happened, or simply curious about how belief systems control information and thought, this video is for you. We're going to take an honest, unflinching look at the psychological tools that turn faith into something else entirely. Let's begin. Tactic 1. Appeal to authority. When a question arises, the answer is simple. The governing body has already explained this. And suddenly, questioning becomes synonymous with rebellion. This is the appeal to authority tactic, replacing the search for truth with blind obedience. Who decides what's right isn't the Bible. It's 8 men in New York. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're at a meeting, and something bothers you about a teaching. Maybe it's the interpretation of a Bible verse that seems forced. Maybe it's a policy that doesn't align with what you understand about love and compassion. So you approach an elder with genuine curiosity, hoping for a discussion, a dialogue, a mutual search for understanding. What happens next reveals everything. Instead of engaging with your question on its merits, instead of examining the evidence together, you're directed to a publication. The Watchtower from October 2015 addresses this. Or perhaps, the governing body clarified this in the annual meeting. The message is clear. The question has already been answered. Your job isn't to think, it's to accept. This is the classic fallacy of appealing to authority, but it operates with particular effectiveness in religious contexts. After all, these aren't just any authorities. They're presented as God's channel of communication, the faithful and discreet slave, the only source of accurate biblical understanding in the entire world. To question them isn't just questioning human interpretation, it's questioning God Himself. And here's where it gets psychologically brilliant. By positioning themselves as the exclusive mediators between God and humanity, the governing body creates a system where independent thought becomes spiritual danger. If you think for yourself, you might run ahead of the organization. If you study the Bible without their publications, you might fall into independent thinking, which, yes, is actually presented as a negative thing. The rhetoric is carefully constructed. Trust in Jehovah's organization. Wait on Jehovah. Don't lean on your own understanding. These phrases sound humble and faithful, but in practice, they mean, don't trust your own reasoning, don't use your own judgment, don't question what we tell you. Consider how this affects someone psychologically. When you're taught from childhood, or from the moment of your conversion, that questioning leadership equals questioning God, a powerful association forms in your mind. Doubt becomes spiritually dangerous. Curiosity becomes pride. Critical thinking becomes apostasy. And so, even when contradictions appear, even when policies change, even when predictions fail, the response isn't to examine the evidence. The response is to trust more deeply in the authority. Jehovah's organization will clarify things in due time. The failure isn't with the leaders, it's with your faith for questioning them. This creates what psychologists call thought stopping. Whenever a challenging question arises, instead of thinking it through, your mind automatically redirects to the authority. You stop the thought before it fully forms. And over time, this becomes automatic. You're not even aware you're doing it. Impact phrase: when thinking becomes disobedience, faith has already become a prison. But here's what makes this particularly insidious. The Bible itself is used as a weapon against biblical thinking. Witnesses are encouraged to read the Bible daily, but only through the lens of organizational publications. The Scriptures become a tool not for discovering truth, but for confirming what you've already been told. It's biblical study without biblical freedom. And if you persist in asking questions, if you refuse to accept the appeal to authority, then the other tactics come into play. Tactic 2. Attack on intent. Ask something uncomfortable, and watch how the focus shifts. Why do you believe only 144,000 go to heaven? Response: have you been reading apostate material? Instead of answering the question, they attack the questioner. The tactic is clear: transform curiosity into guilt. This way, whoever doubts feels wrong just for thinking. This is perhaps the most psychologically damaging tactic of all, because it doesn't just shut down questions, it makes you afraid to have them in the first place. Let's explore how this works in practice. You've noticed something that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's a doctrinal inconsistency. Maybe it's the way a judicial committee handled someone's case. Maybe it's the fact that the organization predicted the end of the world multiple times, and those predictions didn't come true. So you ask about it, not with hostility, but with genuine concern. You want to understand. And instead of receiving an answer, you receive an interrogation about your motives. Why are you asking this? Where did you hear this? Have you been on the internet? Who have you been talking to? Are you sure you're spiritually healthy? The question you asked is ignored. Instead, you become the subject under investigation. This is the ad hominem fallacy, attacking the person rather than addressing the argument. But in the Jehovah's Witness context, it's weaponized with particular effectiveness because it exploits the believer's desire to be seen as faithful. Nobody wants to be viewed as spiritually weak or, worse, as a potential apostate. So when your motives are questioned, you immediately go on the defensive. No, I'm not reading apostate material. I just wondered because... And now you're justifying your thoughts instead of getting answers to your questions. The conversation has been successfully redirected. Your question is forgotten. Your loyalty is what's being discussed now. The psychology here is brilliant in its cruelty. By making the questioner the problem, the organization never has to address uncomfortable questions. The issue isn't the teaching, it's your heart condition. The problem isn't the failed prophecy, it's your lack of faith. The difficulty isn't the policy, it's your critical spirit. And here's where it gets darker. This tactic doesn't just silence questions in the moment. It teaches people to self-censor. After you've been questioned about your motives once or twice, you learn. You learn that asking questions makes you suspect. You learn that expressing doubts invites scrutiny. You learn that the safest path is silence. So you stop asking out loud. But the questions don't disappear, they just go underground. They fester in your mind, creating cognitive dissonance that you can't resolve because you can't discuss it. You feel isolated because you think you're the only one with doubts, when in reality, many others around you have the same questions but are equally afraid to voice them. The attack on intent also serves another purpose. It maintains group conformity through fear of judgment. In every kingdom hall, people learn to monitor not just their own thoughts, but each other's. If you notice a brother or sister asking too many questions, you're encouraged to report it to the elders. This creates an atmosphere of surveillance where everyone is potentially watching everyone else. It's the religious equivalent of a police state, but the police are your friends, your family, the people you love and trust. And the crime isn't action, it's thought. You can be guilty of nothing more than honest curiosity, and still find yourself marked as dangerous. Impact phrase: they don't rebut your arguments, they rebut your courage. Think about what this does to human relationships. Imagine not being able to be fully honest with your spouse about your doubts. Imagine feeling afraid to tell your parents that something in the teaching troubles you. Imagine isolating yourself emotionally from everyone you love because you can't risk showing them what you really think. This is the reality for thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses who have questions but can't ask them. They live in a constant state of self-monitoring, always checking their thoughts, always making sure their questions don't show on their faces, always pretending to be more certain than they feel. It's exhausting. It's lonely. And it's exactly what keeps the system functioning. Because a person afraid to question isn't a person who's going to leave. They're trapped by their own fear of being seen as weak, rebellious, or unfaithful. The prison doesn't need locks when the prisoners guard themselves. Tactic 3. Information control. Reading any source outside of Watchtower publications is considered dangerous. The world is full of lies, they say. But truth has never feared comparison. Information isolation creates a closed universe where everything confirms what the organization has already taught. And whoever steps outside this universe becomes seen as an enemy. Let me tell you something powerful. The sign of a healthy belief system is that it welcomes examination. Truth can withstand scrutiny. Truth invites questions. Truth doesn't fear comparison. So when an organization builds walls around information, when it forbids its members from reading certain books, visiting certain websites, or even talking to certain people, that's not protection. That's control. The Jehovah's Witness organization has mastered information control to an extraordinary degree. From the platform, members are regularly warned about the dangers of worldly information. The Internet is painted as a minefield of apostate lies. Former members are described as mentally diseased. Independent research is labeled as satanic trap. The language is carefully chosen. It's not, "We prefer you don't read that." It's, "Reading that material puts your eternal salvation at risk." It's not, "We believe our interpretation is correct." It's, "Outside information is poisoned, designed by Satan to destroy your faith." The stakes are presented as ultimate. Read the wrong thing, and you might lose paradise. This creates what cult researchers call an information bubble, or epistemological closure. Members are taught that there is only one reliable source of truth, the organization's publications. Everything else is suspect. Every other voice is potentially demonic. This isn't presented as preference, but as spiritual survival. Consider the psychological impact. When you believe that reading a book critical of your religion might cause you to lose eternal life, you're not going to read that book. When you're convinced that former members are liars influenced by Satan, you're not going to listen to their stories. When you're taught that independent Bible study without organizational guidance leads to apostasy, you're not going to try it. The organization doesn't need to physically stop you from accessing information. They've installed a mental barrier that's far more effective. You censor yourself. You avoid certain websites. You change the channel when ex-witnesses are interviewed. You refuse to read books that might challenge your beliefs. Not because someone is forcing you, but because you're genuinely afraid of what might happen if you do. And here's the brilliant part. This fear is framed as faith. Avoiding outside information isn't presented as censorship. It's presented as loyalty to God. It's spiritual discipline. It's proof of your devotion. The organization takes what is actually intellectual cowardice and rebrands it as courage. But let's think about this logically for a moment. If your religion is true, if your beliefs are based on solid evidence, if your interpretations are correct, what exactly is there to fear from reading alternative viewpoints? Truth doesn't become false because you examined its opposite. Reality doesn't change because you considered a different perspective. In fact, the opposite is true. When you've examined all sides of a question and your conclusion still stands, your confidence in that conclusion is strengthened, not weakened. The only reason to fear information is if you suspect, deep down, that your beliefs might not withstand scrutiny. The information control extends beyond just religious topics. Witnesses are discouraged from higher education, not officially banned, but strongly discouraged. Why? Because universities expose people to critical thinking, to diverse viewpoints, to questioning methodologies. These skills are dangerous to an organization that requires unquestioning acceptance. They're warned about bad associations, which includes anyone who might challenge their beliefs. This socially isolates members, ensuring that most of their friends and social connections are other witnesses. When everyone around you believes the same things, when everyone reinforces the same ideas, it becomes almost impossible to think differently. Impact phrase: when a religion forbids books, it's because it's afraid of losing readers. The tragic irony is that this information control is often internalized to the point where members defend it. I don't need to read apostate lies to know they're false. I trust the organization to tell me what I need to know. Outside research is just Satan trying to deceive me. The prison guard becomes indistinguishable from the prisoner. And for those who do break through this barrier, who do summon the courage to read prohibited material, to listen to ex-member testimonies, to research the organization's history, the experience is often devastating, not because they discover lies, but because they discover that they were lied to about what those sources contained. The apostate lies turn out to be documented facts. The mentally diseased former members turn out to be articulate, compassionate people with legitimate concerns. The satanic deceptions turn out to be simple requests for honest examination. This is why information control is so crucial to the organization's survival. It's not protecting members from falsehood, it's protecting the organization from accountability. Tactic 4. Circular reasoning. You ask something direct, and you receive a verse taken out of context. You repeat the question, and you get the same answer, now with an illustration. This is circular reasoning. It looks like explanation, but it's disguised evasion. The goal is to tire you out until you give up. Let me show you how this works with a real example. Imagine you ask, how can we be certain that 1914 is when Christ began ruling invisibly in heaven? The response: well, Daniel chapter 4 talks about 7 times, and Revelation 12 mentions the kingdom being established, so clearly 1914 is significant. But you press further. Okay, but how do we calculate 7 times to equal 2,520 years? And why start counting from 607 BCE? The answer: because that's when Jerusalem was destroyed, and we need to count from that date to get to 1914. You continue, but all archaeological and historical evidence points to Jerusalem being destroyed in 587 BCE, not 607. Doesn't that make the calculation wrong? The response: well, the Bible is more reliable than worldly historians, and the prophecy in Daniel proves the calculation is correct. You see what happened. You asked for evidence to support 1914. They pointed to biblical calculations that assume 1914 is correct. When you question the calculations, they point back to 1914 being prophetically significant. It's a perfect circle. The conclusion proves the premise, and the premise proves the conclusion. This is the logical fallacy of circular reasoning, also called begging the question. And it's devastatingly effective in religious contexts because it mimics actual reasoning while avoiding it entirely. The beauty of this tactic from the organization's perspective is that it feels like you're getting an answer. There are Bible verses. There are explanations. There are illustrations about trees and kings and prophecies. There's a lot of content. But when you examine it closely, nothing actually connects. The pieces don't form a logical argument. They form a loop. And here's where the psychological exhaustion comes in. When you ask a sincere question and receive a circular answer, you have 3 choices: accept it, push back again, or give up. Most people, after going around the circle 2 or 3 times, choose the third option. Not because they're satisfied, but because they're tired. The organization counts on this. They count on the fact that most people won't pursue a question through 5 or 6 rounds of circular reasoning. They count on the social awkwardness of repeatedly challenging someone's answer. They count on your desire to be agreeable, to not cause trouble, to fit in. Consider another example. You ask, why are Jehovah's Witnesses the only true religion? The answer: because we're the only ones teaching the truth from the Bible. You probe, but other religions claim they teach from the Bible too. What makes your interpretation the correct one? The response: because Jehovah has chosen us as his organization and gives us understanding through the faithful and discreet slave. You continue, how do we know Jehovah has chosen this organization? The answer: because we're the only ones teaching the truth from the Bible. Full circle. The organization is true because it teaches truth, and we know it teaches truth because it's the true organization. There's no external validation, no objective criteria, no way to falsify the claim. It's self-referential belief presented as logical argument. The circular reasoning extends to almost every major teaching. The Bible is interpreted through Watchtower publications, and Watchtower publications are validated by their interpretation of the Bible. The governing body is legitimate because God appointed them, and we know God appointed them because the governing body says so. The doctrine is correct because the organization teaches it, and the organization is trustworthy because its doctrine is correct. What makes this particularly frustrating for thinking people is that they can sense something is wrong, but they can't always articulate what it is. The reasoning sounds biblical. The logic seems religious. But there's no solid ground anywhere. It's turtles all the way down, each answer supported by another answer that ultimately references the first answer. Impact phrase, it's like running around the tower, thinking you're getting closer to God. The illustrations deserve special mention here. Jehovah's Witnesses love illustrations, stories, analogies, metaphors designed to clarify complex ideas. But often, these illustrations function as diversions. You ask a hard question about doctrine, and instead of receiving a direct answer, you get a story about a ship captain, or a mother baking bread, or a student following a teacher. The illustration seems to address your question. It feels relevant. But when you examine it, you realize it doesn't actually answer anything. It just provides an emotional or intuitive appeal that bypasses logical analysis. You walk away feeling like your question was addressed, but if someone asked you to explain the actual answer, you couldn't do it, because there wasn't one. This is psychological manipulation through narrative. Humans are wired to respond to stories. We find them persuasive even when they don't contain actual arguments. So by responding to logical questions with emotional illustrations, the organization short-circuits critical thinking while appearing to engage with it. The exhaustion factor cannot be overstated. When every question leads to a circle, when every challenge receives an answer that sounds substantive but isn't, when every doubt is met with more words that ultimately mean nothing, you eventually stop asking. Not because you got answers, but because the process of not getting answers is so mentally draining that silence becomes preferable. And that's exactly the point. The goal isn't to satisfy your questions. The goal is to make you stop asking them. Tactic 5. Fear and shunning. Few things control more effectively than the fear of losing those you love. And that's what keeps many silent within Jehovah's Witnesses. Being disfellowshipped means being treated as dead, including by your own family. It's the final weapon, love conditioned on obedience. This is where all the other tactics culminate. This is the enforcement mechanism that makes everything else work. Because you can survive uncomfortable answers. You can endure having your motives questioned. You can navigate information control and circular reasoning. But can you survive losing everyone you love? Let me be crystal clear about what shunning means in practice. If you're disfellowshipped or if you disassociate yourself from the Jehovah's Witnesses, active members are instructed to completely cut off contact with you. This isn't casual avoidance. This is comprehensive social death. Your parents won't speak to you. Your children won't acknowledge you. Your siblings will treat you as if you don't exist. Friends you've known your entire life will walk past you on the street without making eye contact. If you call, they hang up. If you write, they don't respond. If you show up at their door, they close it in your face. And this isn't optional. This isn't individual families making personal choices. This is official organizational policy, enforced through threat of punishment. If a witness maintains normal contact with a disfellowshipped person, even their own child, they themselves can be disfellowshipped for it. The psychological warfare here is extraordinary. The organization takes the deepest human need, connection, belonging, love, and weaponizes it. They make your relationships hostage to your beliefs. Step out of line, and you lose everything. Not your salvation. Not your relationship with God. Your actual, tangible human connections. Think about what this does to someone wrestling with doubts. You've discovered something troubling about the organization. Maybe it's the failed prophecies. Maybe it's the handling of abuse cases. Maybe it's the constant doctrinal changes. You know in your heart that something is deeply wrong. But you also know that if you express these doubts, if you act on them, you'll lose your family. Your mother, who you talk to every day, will never speak to you again. Your father won't walk you down the aisle if you get married. Your siblings won't let you meet your nieces and nephews. Your childhood friends will vanish from your life. If you're married to a witness who doesn't share your doubts, you might lose your spouse and any custody of your children. This is the calculus that thousands of people face. Truth or family, integrity or connection, honesty or love. And for many, the price of freedom is simply too high. So they stay silent. They sit in meetings, nodding along to teachings they no longer believe. They go door to door preaching a message they have doubts about. They maintain a facade of faith while dying inside, because the alternative, losing everyone they love, is unthinkable. This is called PMO, physically in, mentally out. And there are more PMOs in kingdom halls than most people realize. They're the ones who look slightly uncomfortable during certain talks, who volunteer a bit less enthusiastically, who find reasons to miss meetings occasionally. They're not lacking faith, they're maintaining a survival strategy in a high-control environment. The shunning policy has been widely criticized by mental health professionals, human rights organizations, and former members. It's been called emotional blackmail, psychological abuse, and a violation of basic human rights to family association. The organization's response? That it's a biblical practice, necessary for congregation purity, and an act of love designed to bring the wayward back. But let's examine that claim. If shunning were truly loving, we'd expect it to lead to reconciliation. We'd see disfellowshipped people overwhelmed with gratitude for the tough love that brought them back. Instead, what we see is trauma, depression, suicide, families permanently destroyed, lives shattered. People who escape the organization but spend decades recovering from the psychological damage. Impact phrase, love that depends on agreement, isn't love. It's emotional blackmail. The fear of shunning doesn't just affect those who leave. It affects everyone still inside. It creates an environment of conformity where people are afraid to be authentic, afraid to express doubts, afraid to ask questions that might make them suspect. The threat doesn't need to be stated explicitly. Everyone knows what happens if you cross the line. This fear also prevents current members from listening to former members. When someone leaves, they're immediately labeled as apostate, mentally diseased, influenced by Satan. Current members are forbidden from reading their stories, listening to their experiences, or considering their reasons for leaving. Why? Because those stories are dangerous. Not because they're false, but because they're often true. A person who leaves and maintains their integrity, who speaks calmly and clearly about why the organization's teachings are flawed, who lives a happy and moral life outside the religion, that person is terrifying to the organization. They're evidence that you can leave and be okay, that you can question and survive, that losing the organization doesn't mean losing everything. So they must be silenced, not through rational argument, but through social death. Make them untouchable, and their message becomes untouchable too. The cruelty of this system cannot be overstated. Parents are encouraged to shun their own children. Adult children are told to shun their elderly parents. Spouses sometimes shun their partners. The natural bonds of human affection, the relationships that give life meaning, are subordinated to organizational loyalty. And perhaps most tragically, people inside the organization defend this practice. They'll tell you it's loving. They'll say it's necessary. They'll claim it's biblical. They've internalized the abuse to such a degree that they can inflict it on their own loved ones while believing they're doing the right thing. This is what happens when an organization successfully replaces human conscience with institutional policy. When obedience to human authority becomes more important than basic human decency. When maintaining the system matters more than the individuals crushed beneath it. The tactics are subtle, but the effect is profound. Fear, silence, and obedience shape a mind that believes it's free, when in reality, it's imprisoned. And the first step to freedom is recognizing the prison. We've journeyed through 5 psychological tactics today, and if you've made it this far, you might be feeling several things. If you're currently a Jehovah's Witness, you might be defensive, angry, or troubled. If you've left, You might feel validated but also sad, recognizing how these tactics affected you. If you've never been involved, you might be shocked that such mechanisms exist in a religion that presents itself as loving and truthful. All of these reactions are valid. Truth can be uncomfortable. Recognition can be painful. But awareness is the first step toward freedom, whether that's freedom to leave, freedom to stay with eyes open, or freedom to help others navigate these complex dynamics. Let's review what we've uncovered. The appeal to authority that replaces thinking with obedience. The attack on intent that makes questioning feel like sin. The information control that creates a bubble of carefully managed reality. The circular reasoning that exhausts your pursuit of truth. And the fear of shunning that keeps you compliant even when your mind rebels. These aren't random behaviors. They're a system. A sophisticated, multi-layered system designed to create and maintain conformity. And it works. It works on intelligent people. It works on kind people. It works on sincere people who genuinely want to serve God and live righteous lives. That's what makes it so insidious. If this system only captured the weak-minded or morally compromised, it wouldn't be nearly as successful. But it captures good people. People with integrity, compassion, and genuine faith. And it redirects all those admirable qualities toward organizational loyalty instead of truth. Here's what I want you to understand. If you're inside this system and feeling doubtful, you're not spiritually weak. If you're asking questions, you're not prideful. If you're troubled by what you've discovered, you're not mentally diseased. You're thinking. You're being honest. You're having the courage to examine what you've been taught. That takes more strength than blind obedience ever will. And if you've already left, know that your decision to prioritize truth over comfort, to choose integrity over social acceptance, to risk everything for authenticity, that's not apostasy. That's courage. That's the most fundamentally human thing you can do, to think for yourself, to question authority, to seek truth even when it's painful. The Jehovah's Witness organization will tell you that leaving means leaving God. That's false. The organization is not God. Questioning human interpretation of religious texts is not the same as rejecting divine truth. Freedom from organizational control is not freedom from spirituality, morality, or meaning. Many former witnesses go on to develop deeper, more authentic relationships with faith, whatever form that takes for them. Many find spiritual homes in other traditions. Many develop secular philosophies that are rich with meaning and purpose. And some maintain belief in God while rejecting the organizational structure that claimed to represent Him. All of these paths are valid. Because here's the real truth. Your relationship with ultimate reality, with meaning, with the divine if you believe in it, that's yours. No organization can mediate it for you. No group of men in New York or anywhere else can stand between you and truth. The tactics we've discussed today aren't unique to Jehovah's Witnesses. They appear in various forms across high-control religious groups, political movements, and even some corporate cultures. Understanding them helps you recognize manipulation wherever it appears. It helps you protect not just yourself, but others who might be vulnerable to these psychological weapons. So what do you do with this information? If you're questioning, I encourage you to keep questioning. Research carefully. Read widely. Talk to people with different perspectives. Don't let anyone, including me, tell you what to think. Examine the evidence and draw your own conclusions. If you decide to stay with eyes open. Understand the dynamics at play. Maintain your critical thinking. Don't surrender your conscience to any human authority, no matter how divine they claim their mandate to be. If you decide to leave, do so carefully and strategically. Connect with support systems. Understand that you'll grieve, not just relationships, but your entire worldview. That's normal. That's healthy. And you'll get through it. And for those watching who have never been involved, show compassion to those who are struggling. Understand that leaving a high-control group isn't as simple as just walk away. People are leaving behind their entire social structure, their sense of identity, their understanding of reality. They're not weak for struggling, they're remarkably strong for trying. The journey from belief to doubt to freedom is different for everyone. There's no single timeline, no prescribed path, no one right way to navigate it. Be patient with yourself or with others who are on this journey. One final thought: the opposite of control isn't chaos. It's choice. Real freedom isn't the absence of structure or meaning. It's the ability to examine your beliefs, question your assumptions, and choose your path based on honest evaluation rather than fear and manipulation. That freedom is available to you. It always has been. The prison exists in your mind, and it was built there by others, one psychological tactic at a time. But here's the beautiful truth: what humans build, humans can dismantle. The first step is recognition. You've taken that step today. Where you go from here is entirely up to you. And that's exactly how it should be. Thank you for watching. If this video resonated with you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And remember, your mind is yours. Your conscience is yours. Your life is yours. Don't let anyone take that away from you.